Hey, what's going on, guys? Hope everybody's having a good Monday. Welcome back to my series where we're making a game similar to the game The Binding of Isaac. In this video, we're going to be working on this black edge that covers the hard edge at the side of the room. So if you look at this model in Blender, you can see that there is a perfectly straight line at the side of the room. And that doesn't actually work in the game because it looks stupid. You can't just have a flat edge. It looks like it doesn't make sense, right? So in the game, I've added this triangulated, black kind of smoky, foggy thing. It's a visual effect, and we're going to cover that today. We're also going to be making these portals. So when you enter the room, these doors are going to be portals instead of actual doors. And just because it looks better, you could use doors as well. I didn't fix the boss room yet, but the item room and the shop have a ray that gets cast from the bottom of the door. So when you enter a room that has the item room or the shop, and it's a room like this where this is not flat, right? Like this is you can see that this is like a giant hill, right? So because of that, the edge of the room might not be perfectly flat. And so what it does is when you enter the room, it casts a ray at the ground. And if it hits the ground, like something on the layer floor, it will teleport the door to 5 above the ground so that no matter what room you this gets spawned in, this is the boss. I haven't done it for the boss door yet. But if you do this in if this was the item room, it would be right flush to the ground. And we're going to be, because all of these rooms are going to be different heights. The other thing is if you put enemies inside of this room and the enemies are walking up and down, your character has to be able to hit them. So I've made it so that when you're attacking, you can see that the attacks will follow the curve of the floor automatically and stay a certain distance from the floor. That way, if you're shooting and it goes down a hill, then you can still hit the enemies. It also works going up the hill because how often it triggers, it moves it instantly up. So as it's going up the hill, unless you're directly touching the hill, it will. Here, I'll show you. Let's just go down the hill and see if we can do this. So yeah, you can see that it goes up the hill as well. This is a big deal because if you want to have different height of floors in your game, you have to account for that. And I've also made it so that right inside of the prefab, so I think we call it default attack prefab, you can choose the height. So right now you can see these ones are very close to the ground, which it's a top-down game, so you can't really tell. But you could maybe put this higher if you want to. It's a 10. That way they're floating a little bit higher off the ground. But anyway, we're not going to bother with that because like I said, from a top-down perspective, you can't really see that. But it just makes it so that you can attack enemies wherever they are in the room, and it will just go matching the level of the ground. So a lot has been changed in this video. The other thing is jumping is in the game now as an item. So you can get jumping. You can't jump with space anymore, but it's an item that I've added to the item room. And there's going to be a secret item at the top of this tree, most likely. So you can actually climb the tree. You can't right now because you don't have jumping enabled. But if jumping was enabled, you could climb the tree. And up here, there's going to be an item that you can't see. And I'm going to make it so there's kind of secrets like that where you can find that kind of thing as you're playing. But yeah, anyway, I think this room looks pretty cool. And so you can see you can leave this room and the doors are working. And let's go this way. And so you can see that this door is flush to the ground because it casts a ray. I also made the zombies so that they speed up in increments. So they don't just chase you at the same speed all the time. They'll go run for a little bit and then they'll have a burst of speed where they actually try to catch up to you. It makes it harder to get away from them. I also fixed a huge number of bugs, and I don't have time to go through everything on camera because when you're working on a game like this, you might find 1,000 bugs or something and you just go and fix them and it's just boring. No one's going to watch that, right? So yeah, so you can open the door, you go through the room, you get the helmet. Yeah, this intro is really long and boring now. So anyway, yeah, like I said, if you guys are enjoying the series, make sure you like the video and subscribe to my channel. And yeah, let's get started. Okay, so first things first, to make this blur at the edge, it's a visual effect graph. So the first thing you need to do is go to the window menu at the top, click the package manager and go in the Unity registry. You can type in visual and just make sure you have the visual effect graph enabled. If you don't, you can click install here. This only works on the URP and the HDRP. If you're doing bland, the normal Unity project, this won't show up. So just make sure you're using URP or HDRP. But anyway, so if you right click at the beginning, or at the bottom, you can click create and then visual effects, visual effect graph. When you do that, it will create something that looks exactly like this. If you do that, you can go ahead and drag it into your scene. So let me go and do that. I'm just going to work with the one that I already have because I'm not going to remake this from scratch. And so you can see this is the effect that we're kind of going for. And we're going to make this bigger because our room is bigger. And so that's the edge glow. So let's open up the visual effect graph so you can see what's inside of it. So we're spawning, to add any of the blocks that are missing, you can press space on your keyboard and type in the name. So like if you want to add this constant spawn rate, it should be there by default, but I'm just going to go through all of the different things inside of this. So we're spawning 1,000 particles a second. The limit is 200,000. The limit is so high because we're using a very long lifetime, which is 6 seconds. You could turn this to lower if you want to. It doesn't matter. You got to make sure you set the bounds to something pretty massive because this is taking up the entire screen. And so if you go out of the bounds, it won't draw this. The other thing you need to do is if you click on the visual effect at the bottom on the right, there's something for the culling flags. Just change this to always recompute, bounds, and simulate. If you don't, like I said, like if you go out of the range of it, like even if you're not off the screen, it will stop drawing it and it will be invisible. So we're setting the size to 5. And then we're changing the position to a box. So all of these particles will immediately be teleported into, just think of like an imaginary square. And it's actually more of a line. So on the x-axis and the y-axis, we're using 1. And then on the z-axis, we're using 74. This controls how long the line is. So like, let me shrink this back down because we're not going to be actually using this for the room because I already put them in the room. But let's put this back to 1 for now. So the particles spawn in a 1 by 1 line. And so if you make this number larger, like 74 larger, then you'll see that the line gets bigger. And you can even see the line on the thing and you can drag the little parts to make it exactly as big as you want to. So this looks really cool and you could make it thicker if you wanted to. So like if you change the x-axis, it will widen it. You don't need to do that though, because it's at the edge of the room. So it's only covering the edge. You don't need to do this. So then we're setting the velocity to basically just go upwards. Now we're also setting there to be a random X, which is like forward and backward from this angle, and Z, which is left and right in this angle. But the main thing is that you want the velocity to be between 0.2 and 3, or the Y is how fast the particles are going upwards. You don't want them to go too high. And because our lifetime is so long, like 1 to 6 seconds is pretty long. If you make this too high, then there'll be particles floating off into outer space. And this is already kind of tall enough. In fact, it could probably be even less tall. I think that is the perfect thing. So then we're setting the angle of these. So this is of the individual particles to be random. Because we're using a triangle for the particle, you want to set this to a random angle so that they're not all the same. If you don't do this, you can see that all of the triangles are on the same angle. And they're rotating over life, but it doesn't matter. Let's just do this so that they rotate. They start rotated, so they're not all at the exact same starting point. Here in the update particle, this is happening every frame. So this is very similar to the update method in the actual coding or whatever. So we're adding a very small rotation over the lifetime. So this means that it will rotate as it's going. You only need to do this on the z-axis because these are flat. And so we only want because they're just a flat triangle. So we only want this to rotate on the one axis, not all of them, because you don't want to see the side of the rectangle. And all of these are facing the camera because we're using orient face camera plane. So that makes them face the camera no matter what angle you're looking at. So you only need to rotate them on this axis and not the other two. So then in here, we're using a omelet triangle as our output. So the default is to use a quad. So if you drag this though, you can create a triangle, and using a square box doesn't look as good for this just because of the way that it splits it up better if it's triangles rather than square boxes. The square boxes are more visible than the triangles are. So let's open the edge blur shader. So this is a shader that we're using for this. If you want to create this shader, you can right click at the bottom, click create. shader graph, URP lit shader graph. And then so after you've created it, you can double click on it. You don't need to make a material for this. The VFX can directly use the shader. This is a very, very basic shader. So let's just drag all this stuff into line. I was initially going to use the camera and get the color of the scene and then use blurring, but it didn't look as good as just using black and white. So if you open the graph inspector on the left, you want to change this to unlit, because the particles should not be reflecting light. The surface type should be transparent because we're going to be using the alpha channel to get rid of some of the things so it's not so flush. And then the blending mode can still be alpha. And at the very bottom, you need to turn on support VFX graph. Inside of the VFX graph, this shader graph option will not be there by default unless you go into preferences. And we did this in a previous video, but if you're not following from a previous video, under the visual effects for preferences, you have to turn on experimental operators and blocks. If you don't turn this on, then this option to use the shader graph in your particles is not going to be there, and you won't have an option to make this look like this. So we're just going to be using noise to remove alpha from the particles individually. So we have a time node that's being multiplied by 0.2 on the x-axis. So if you put a vector 2 into this, x is left and right and y is like up and down. So we're only moving this on the x-axis. So the alpha is only moving horizontally. It's not moving up and down on the y-axis. You can change this to whatever you want. You don't want to make this too high because it will be visible in the scene. So we're multiplying these together. This basically slows down. Time defaults at 1 and 1. So then we're going into the offset of a tiling and offset node, which goes into a simple noise, which has a scale. If you need to create any of these nodes, you could just press the spacebar and just type in the name of the node that you're trying to add. And then this is going to into the in of a smooth step. So what smooth step does is it takes anything that's above 0.33, anything that's below 0.33 will become black, and anything that's above 0.33 will become a light. It will stay the same. So anything below this turns into black, and so this cuts away. So the darker areas of this would be partially visible if you didn't do this, and then this just makes the darker areas darker, so that you can cut away more of the alpha using the noise. So this has this effect that you can see in the background here. So that's all it is for the shader graph, and we have the base color as black. I think that's the default, and so that's it for the visual effect. So let's go back. And so now I want to show you this portal that I made. So this is just a sphere, like an actual just game object sphere. So if you right click on the left side here, you can make a sphere. And let's just take this in the scene view and we'll move it up. And we'll just put it over here by our player. And we can take the scale and we just want to lock this and make it a little bit bigger. And then once you have it the size that you want your little portal thing to be, you can flatten it on the y-axis. So unlock it and, sorry, not the y-axis, the z-axis. No, it was the y-axis. I was right the first time. It's the x-axis. It's not neither of the things I thought. So just drag the x-axis to be smaller until you get like a rounded shape. And then I have a material that's using a shader on this sphere that I already have. So let's click on this, and that's not clicking that. Hang on. Here we go. Black noise. Okay, so if you right click at the bottom, you can do the same thing where you create a shader graph. It's going to be a lit shader graph. And then you need to create a material for this because we're putting the material on the thing. So this is the material that I've made. So when you right click and click create material, which is right here at the top, you can click this drop down and type in the name of whatever you named your shader graph. I named it black noise. That doesn't seem like an appropriate name at this point, but whatever. So this is the shader that actually does this. Let me get rid of the blackboard for now. It's the same kind of thing where it needs to be unlit, transparent. You don't need to support the VFX graph anymore. And yeah, so this one is a lot more complicated than the previous one that we made. So we're going to go through this really quickly. So we've got the same thing with the time node going into the multiply by 0.2, so it only moves on the x-axis. This is getting going into a tiling and offset node, but we're rotating this 90 degrees because the UV, if you don't rotate it 90 degrees, then there's a hard line on the edge of the thing and you'll be able to see it. So let me just see if I can find the line. See this line here? If you don't rotate it, this line will be vertical, or sorry, around the edges, and you can see that line. It's more visible because the shape is cut into a UV, and the UV, we want it to go along the front side where it's less visible and there's less alpha being demonstrated. If you don't rotate it, let me just unrotate it and I'll show you. Black noise, just changes to 0 and click save. So inside the game, what the hell? Maybe it does nothing. Maybe I have to change the center or something. I don't know. Anyway, you could just don't include this for right now. I think that maybe I have to change the center. I'm not going to do that on camera, but maybe I have to change the center to a different point to rotate it. But the point of rotating it was to get the line to be less visible, and it doesn't look like it's actually doing anything. But anyway, so the tiling and offset goes into a simple noise. This goes into a step node. So step node and smooth step are very, very different. Step basically makes the light part of it. There's only black or white from a step node. So it's either one or the other based on an edge. So if the number is less than 0.4, it will go black. And if it's above 0.6, it will go white, but it doesn't keep the fadedness of it. And then I'm also putting this into a multiply of -1 and -1 for the UV. And then I'm putting that into a simple noise so that it goes the opposite direction of the one that's already there. And then this is going into a multiply. So these are being multiplied together. And then I'm using a Fresnel effect, which basically just adds more visibility on the edges, I guess is the best description. It's like edge visibility. So like all of the effect will go to the edges. And then we're multiplying this so that the edges are going to glow, and then there's going to be the noise. So we have an edge glow and noise. That's basically what this is. And then I've added a gradient, or not a gradient. This is just a color. So you can press spacebar and add a color. And this is the color that I have. I have the intensity turned up. This only works if you change this mode to HDR. If you just use default, the intensity option won't be here. You could just copy my color if you want to. And then, so this goes into a multiply with this. So only the non-black parts will be shown because we're putting this into the alpha. So anything that's black in this picture will not be visible at all. And then we're putting this part into the color so that the actual parts that do show up will be like this blue glowy color. So I think this looks really cool for like a portal effect at the side of this type of room. And I think it looks better than an actual door because the edges are already kind of shadowy. So adding like a portal at the side of the room is super cool. And yeah, so that's going to be it for the day. I hope you guys are enjoying the series. If you are, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. And like I said at the beginning, the entire project is available for download in the description of the video for free. So you're welcome to download it and use any of the assets or whatever you want to in your game. There's no like licensing or anything like that. I don't really care about that stuff. So yeah, like I said, it's available, and hopefully I will see you guys in the next one.